Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And welcome to the Help Me, I'm Middle-Aged podcast.
Where you can find fun, exciting things about being middle-aged.
Oh, you're going to find things about us and about yourself you never thought you knew.
Hold on, come along for the ride. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the Help Me, I'm Middle-Aged podcast. My name is Rob.
And I'm Rob, too.
And we're here today with Dr. Paul Marciano, best-selling book, Carrots and Sticks Don't Work. And we're here to talk to Dr. Paul. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Paul.
No problem. So we thanks for coming on the show, and we wanted to talk about you. We know each other outside of this interview, so it's going to be a little easier flow.
Right.
And we wanted to figure out what the book is about, what your life work's about. You have a great family history. You're a very interesting guy, and we're just going to try and have a chat for the next hour or however long it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Rob, you have some questions?
Yeah, I had some questions. Growing up in New Jersey, give us a little bit of your history and your background.
Sure. So, as you all know, but maybe your listeners don't, I grew up and live in Three Bridges, New Jersey. We only have one bridge. It's an ambitious town. Born on a 100-acre horse farm, raised by a first-generation Italian-American father who said if you wanted to eat 7 days a week, you work 7 days a week, so that kind of real hardcore work ethic. My bit of a legacy is that my maternal grandfather, Ludwig Bemelmans, was the author and illustrator of the children's book Madeline. Maybe not the men out there, but probably a lot of the women are familiar with that book.
So let me ask you: is the competition scene who's going to sell more books, you or him?
No, I that's not going to happen.
There's always book 3.
There is. Yeah, book 3's on the way.
Okay,
We're
okay,
open, so
okay.
we'll talk about that.
Absolutely, get talking about that.
So what was it like having him, this grandfather who was like a legend in children's book, author, writer? Was that did you see him? Did you talk to him? Would you guys overlap?
Well, unfortunately, he
passed away
before I was born.
Okay.
But I'll share a quick story if y'all don't mind.
No,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, please.
So he was best known for Madeline, but he wrote about 40 or 50 books.
Right.
And he wrote a book called The Golden Basket, and that took place in Bruges, which is in Belgium. And a couple of years ago, I was actually giving a talk there. Just happened to be.
Right.
And inside the Golden Basket is this beautiful 2-page spread of the square.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to visit, I actually was able to take the book and position myself where my grandfather would have stood 75 years earlier to paint it. So it was pretty awesome. And then I had somebody take a picture of me holding the book with the whole square in the background.
Was it changed a lot, or?
He took a little bit of liberties, of course, as any artist would.
Right.
But not only wasn't it fairly true, there actually is a place that's a bar, restaurant, hotel called the Golden Basket. And it's still there. We went to the history folk. It's not named that anymore, but he found that building. So that was pretty cool.
That is great.
That's
awesome. To experience that and stand in his footsteps. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, literally stand in his footsteps,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's where your forefathers have walked before, type of thing.
Yeah, it's very cool. And yep.
So now you grow up in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, which is, for people who aren't familiar, it's like the western part of New Jersey, a little more rural than maybe what average people think of New Jersey if you're not familiar with the geographical area.
Turnpike doesn't go through there.
No, Turnpike does not. We don't have an exit in Hunterdon County.
No.
Well, we do 78, but
Right.
anyway, for the most part. Anyway, so you grow up in Hunterdon County. How do you become an author? What do you do to how do you get down the path? Because a lot of what this podcast is about the journey.
Yes.
Right? It's Help Me, I'm Middle-Aged, okay? I know you're not middle-aged yet, Dr.
Oh,
Paul
please.
Marciano, but we would like to, share with the audience, how you got here.
Right.
The story. What was it like growing up? How did you decide? I know you had a little experience in childhood education.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to say, I was going to laugh, and for those who listening over 50, such as myself, I think there's a pretty big divide, before 50 and after.
Yeah,
I hear you.
It's it's that time. I think I'm not answering your question like a good politician, but I will. So once you turn 50 and you really start to, I think, look back on your life and what matters and what's important, and getting into those later innings. So going back to your question though, about the journey, I always would say that I didn't necessarily have an idea of how my life would go. but it wouldn't have gone like this. So like, you just don't know, right?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of us don't.
A lot of us don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, right? And to be okay with that. And,
Sure.
So,
Well, you didn't write a book on your life. It sort of like unfolds the next chapter.
right. Yeah. So for me, how did I get here? In terms of my journey, I was always attracted to psychology, even in high school, and then went to a very small school called Davidson College, and it became very clear to me, mostly because my father would tell us this: if you don't want to work like this for a living, which was we worked really hard, right? Like
On the farm.
We were the kids that hated summer. Summers were horrible because we only got one day off. We got July 4th off. So
Not 1 day a week, 1 day of summer.
one day of summer, that was it, July 4th.
Wow.
And that was after we got done with the horses in the morning and night, but we got the rest of the day off. So anyway, the idea was like you study hard, right? Like when you get tired, you study hard.
No,
So,
nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
If you want to get off the farm.
It's incentive, I'll give you that.
Yeah. So I mean, I went there and I was really blessed then to get a full scholarship for my master's and PhD at Yale.
Nice.
And then I took more of the academic route of things, and I was there for a couple of years. And here's the thing about academia: one is it looks really good on the outside.
Yeah.
Like everyone's, that's frickin' cush, right? That's awesome. Blah blah. It doesn't look like that from the inside.
No.
It's a ton of work. Certainly not that money is everything, but I remember my first year it was like $32,000. That's not a lot of money. So it's hard to really raise a family on that. And then I just missed home. I think that happens probably to a lot of people. All the rest of my family was back literally at the farm. And my grandmother, whose name, Madeline is her name, that's where the book came from.
Right.
She actually was sick, unfortunately. She had Alzheimer's, as it turned out. So I actually moved in with her and helped to care for her. So I come back. I don't want to take the whole hour up, but you asked the question.
No, it's a conversation.
So-
Go ahead. No, it's a conversation.
So when I got back here, and I realized academia wasn't for me. It just wasn't my thing. My whole family, my grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, brothers are all entrepreneurs, and academia is like the least entrepreneurial thing you could possibly do.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I moved back here in 2000, I worked for a small consulting firm for a couple of months. I ended up going on my own, and then 9/11 hit. As I know the two of you, we just
It's in us.
we just look at our lives,
Right,
We're
right,
like,
right.
what matters, like what's important.
Yeah, there's so many things like you say in life, like before and after. Like
Yeah.
so much stuff
Yeah.
changed. Right?
Everything calls into question at that point.
Right.
Yeah, so I went back to, as I asked myself that question, my roots were actually in working with children and in graduate school. And so I started a company called Color Me Company. And we were a for-profit company with nonprofit intentions. We were actually cited in the Wall Street Journal as an exemplar of companies that give back to their communities.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So it was like a children's arts and craft company. And go ahead, Rob.
Can I stop real quick? So you work on a farm, okay? Growing up, you have an amazing work ethic. I mean, you work on a farm, you're working.
Yeah.
Right? So was it the driving force, the education, and the striving to get off the farm? Then you're off the farm and you're in academia, and you're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Well,
Because so you didn't want to
yeah.
spend your whole life on the farm, right?
Yeah.
Like your dad maybe, because it's really hard work and you want to
Yeah.
do something different. Was that anything that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what my father would have had us think.
Right.
What's interesting is it took me a really, 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 really long time to consider what I do work. And I remember like the day I lost my calluses, right? Because you grow up on the farm, your hands are all calloused.
Right,
I remember
absolutely, absolutely.
Coming back one time and like, in the summer or whatever and had a shovel, I'm like, what the hell is this blister doing here? You know?
Right.
And so it's always been hard for me to equate what I do or we do necessarily as work, right? 'Cause
Right.
It's not being on the farm kind of thing. I am very blessed and fortunate that I found a path that I do love, and I mean, I know a lot of people say this, I do love making a difference, and I feel
Yeah.
that that's what my work has always been about.
Right.
And yeah, so.
So you start the childhood education stuff and the company.
Oh, the Color Me Company.
Right, Color Me Company,
Yeah.
right. And
So we so again, because this is a conversation,
Yes.
it actually was initially called Coloring Card Company, and this is how it came to be. I was teaching in college, I was a professor, and my godchild was 5 years old, And I came back to Three Bridges and visited her, and I had sent her a greeting card. I said, "Oh man, did you get my card?" And she came home, she proudly showed it to me, and she had taken a crayon and drawn all over it. And I realized in that moment that, you know what, greeting cards like aren't fun for kids.
Right.
They're not particularly meaningful, right? So I came up with this idea of imagine combining a coloring book and a greeting card.
Perfect.
So imagine
Yeah.
a Christmas tree, black outline drawings, and
Right.
presents, all black drawing, right? Outline drawing.
Just
I gotta
begging
be honest
for
with you.
color.
As a father of 3, when the kids were little and they would make my wife a birthday card, I think she loves those cards
Yeah.
more than the
Oh,
Hallmark
yeah,
cards.
yeah.
That she,
Personalized.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, that's-
personalized. So that's
Yes.
total
Yeah.
home run.
So we were calling, we create keepsakes was one of our slogans. So the kids would color them. Everyone would be totally unique. Everything was 100% American made.
Right.
We gave to 4 charities. One of would always be around like Wounded Warriors, military. We were very, very family values, very patriotic.
Those
We
type of
actually-
charities.
That's great.
We actually had a whole patriotic line of cards, including something called the Hero Heart cards. So I had a friend whose husband was in the service, came home, and she's going through his duffel bag, and there was this picture of a heart, and then in the heart was like the American flag. And he's like, "Where did you get this?" And his daughter had sent it to him. And so we used that as the basis of a card. It's a
Right.
big heart flag in it. And then inside it said, "Freedom isn't free, but saying thank you is."
Nice.
And so we had thousands of those cards sent over to our troops overseas. And we also had them to firehouses and police stations
Okay,
and all that kind of
nice.
thing.
So now you're in a business where you're getting this type of fulfillment inside.
Totally.
You get
Yeah.
this exchange where it's not everyone even gets to get that, right?
Yeah, no, I
Th-
totally
th-
get
th-
that.
This is something different. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That's a nice payoff.
That's a nice payoff.
Well, yeah, you know, the other thing too is like you got to be willing to go all in, right?
Right.
Whatever.
Like
Entrepreneurial,
everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I remember the first 3 years I worked every day,
Sure.
including July 4th, including Christmas, including Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
all in, all the time, slept in the office, still did all the consulting to help support, you know, that business.
But that's what your dad would do.
Yeah,
Your
right.
Dad would
that's what
work
we do.
7 days a week.
Right.
Oh, yeah, of
So
course.
this is like
just don't have
this,
the
this
cows.
is this is in you
Yeah.
genetically to
Yeah.
go all in.
No.
And I think I'm really fortunate, right? Because most people don't actually have that chance to be able to do that. So I, you know, I call it the PhD I paid for actually too.
Okay.
It's, yeah, a lot of lessons learned
Yeah.
from that. But
No, the world is your classroom at that point.
Yeah.
It's stuff
Yeah.
they don't teach you all the time. And
So then you move from that. We're in the early 2000s. Now we're getting to
yeah, so
you're in the consulting business is parallel with both of those. Those
yes,
things.
yeah. So if we get back a little bit on the path of how we get the carrots and sticks.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
My dissertation was on factors that contributed to people dropping out of mental health clinics. So
Interesting.
you imagine there's a child guidance clinic. So you're a parent, you have a 7-year-old kid who's got some sort of psychological problem. And
Sure,
we dealt
sure.
a lot with conduct disordered kids.
Right.
So you bring them to the clinic, and then they have their initial session, and then they're put on, say, a 20-session kind of
Right,
program.
right.
And so the question is like, obviously a lot of attrition is incredibly high.
Yeah.
Incredibly high. And in fact, the greatest attrition occurs between, of course, the first session and the second.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all kinds of reasons for that. But anyway, I used various models of human motivation, primarily something called the expectancy value theory. But so what motivates people to engage in a behavior and what then demotivates them?
Mm-hmm.
So actually in 2000, I had worked for consulting firms all through my graduate school, so all through the 80s and 90s. And I was asked to give a talk on motivating employees in the 21st century.
Oh.
So the name of my company is Whiteboard because I love whiteboards.
Right.
Okay, like you really get to create on them.
Sure.
And so I started to prepare this presentation. It's going to be global plant managers, like really cool thing, blah, blah, blah. And so I have each motivational model on a slide. And I'm like, if I get up there and show this, I'm going to put everybody to sleep.
That's the biggest problem.
I mean, this
keeping
is
an audience,
brutal, right?
It was just like Maslow and Skinner stuff, or
Yeah, well, that was
Yeah.
part of, that was that. Yep, that stuff was there. Yep, absolutely. So, I turned to my whiteboard, right, and I'm like, okay, listen, these are guys who are plant managers, and I got to leave them with something that matters, right? Again, my work is, I left academia in some ways because they would say it's just academic, right? And I always want to. In fact, my presentation is the first slide is somebody kicking a soccer ball, and I'm like, this is all about putting it on your playing field, right? So I get on my whiteboard and I start putting all the models up, and then just start like drawing arrows and adding stuff together and taking stuff away, and just trying to come to the fundamental. If I could only have one driver of motivation, like what would it be? And that's how I came up with the idea of respect as really the fundamental
Respect in the
driver.
workplace. Respect.
Well, just respect in general, right, as the primary driver
Motivation.
of motivation.
Yeah.
And then it shifted to this idea of engagement. And there's a real difference. I don't know if your audience would necessarily be interested, but the difference between
Our
motivating
audience
and
is
engaging
fascinating what you
people.
said, Dr. Paul.
So I don't know if you want to go down that road or not.
Well, no, absolutely. I think a lot of people probably watching this are in corporate America, and they're probably either employees or employers, and probably could benefit from hearing a little bit more about that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we'll explain like what
Okay.
it's about.
So the idea of course, carrots is you dangle a carrot,
Right.
and it gets people to engage in whatever behavior or do more of it or something positive. And then a stick, of course, you can beat them if they're not engaged in
Right.
that behavior. So the first thing I talk about in the book is when it comes to motivating employees, the image should be like you're taking a wind-up doll, winding them up, and then they run around really fast, and then they unwind. And then as a manager, as a leader, you then are in this game of being responsible for winding people up, and that's not the game you want to be in.
Right.
Right.
It's actually really interesting to know that people, when they do work and then they're rewarded for it, they actually attribute their hard work to the extrinsic reinforcer. In other words, when you compensate somebody for something, it actually reduces their intrinsic motivation for that task.
Right.
I give you a classic example. It's from children, but you take a child, you guys have kids, right? And you get a kid who likes to read. Great. Now you say, hey, listen, Johnny, or Robbie Jr., every time you read for 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a quarter. Okay, great. So we do this for like 2 weeks. Kid likes to read. Now you're going to pay him to read. And now we say, you know what, Johnny, we're not going to pay you to read anymore. Guess what happens?
Johnny doesn't read.
He stops reading.
Yeah.
So in the book, I go over.
I'm going to put it up so the audience.
Yeah,
That's a good call.
Organizations come up with all these motivation programs, right? Employee of the month kinds of things.
Right.
There's 50 years of evidence, like empirical evidence, that traditional reward and recognition programs not only don't work, they actually decrease the overall morale and productivity of an organization.
Wow.
It's not even close. It's
Right.
like, really, it's not.
Well, that brings up an interesting topic. You get to talk to a lot of corporations and do a lot of talks in front of their employees. Do you ever get a chance to hear what there are certain motivational programs they have in force are currently existing? I mean, have you ever heard of the worst possible motivation program?
I'll give you the worst.
Yeah.
The worst is employee of the month.
Is it really?
That's the
okay.
one.
horrible.
Parking spot of the month too.
Well, no. One of my favorite is this guy who won parking spot of the month, and he drove his bicycle to work.
He poured it right in the spot.
Yeah. There's all kinds of reasons this is a bad idea. So one is, if you look at why programs fail, okay, here's a question. So if you've ever been on a diet or known anybody who's been on a diet.
Yes. I've lived half my life on a diet.
Okay. So I'll ask you, Rob, so for how long is a diet effective?
6 to 8 weeks. You have to change your lifestyle.
Okay. Yes. And the answer to this is for as long as you're on it.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
A diet's effective for as long as you're on it.
Yeah.
So if you and what you said was so these kinds of carrots can lead to temporary changes in behavior.
Correct.
But once the program is removed, your behavior actually typically returns to baseline, or when it comes to performance, maybe sometimes below baseline. So it's about making a lifestyle change, right? It's about I eat certain things, I engage in particular behaviors because who I am as a healthy person.
Correct.
You internalize it to be
You
part of your
internalize it.
life. So
Right.
it's- yeah.
So in this book you discussed about how to like make that switch to a permanent.
Well, actually, what I talk about is, and this is again in the context of an organization, right? Employees, supervisors, managers. And by the way, I'll just give you one other example. There's 20 reasons why traditional reward and recognition programs don't work. Okay. The first is because they're programs. They don't lead to sustainable changes typically in kind of who that employee is.
Right.
It's just, again, this carrot, extrinsic, take the carrot away, behavior goes down.
Right.
There's actually, again, in the book, reasons that it actually can destroy teamwork, because let's say, well, we're all working on it as a team together, and there's a carrot out there, and then we work hard and we make the carrot. And let's say, Rob, you were the primary contributor. You're going to say to yourself, well, I should get more of the carrot because
Right.
I worked harder than everybody. Now, how about if we lose? If we lose, you're going to point to us and say, we lost because you guys
held
didn't
me
work hard
back,
enough.
and
Right?
Right.
So, and there is there's I've seen, especially in sales organizations, where people will actually sabotage one another because you get, right? The
Yeah.
carrot's really big.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot on the line.
A lot on the line. Who gets the
Exactly.
The last reason I talk about in the book, which may sound a little counterintuitive, but if organizations, their idea is they're going to spend resources to increase the overall morale and productivity of an organization.
Correct.
Presumably that's the thesis, right? That's the idea. And if we were to divide people into sort of a red bucket, poor performers, yellow bucket, middle performers, green bucket, top performers,
Right.
okay? So we put these programs in place. Who wins? In which bucket?
The green performers.
Right. It's an easy, right? It's an obvious question, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay. It's Grant's tomb. The green bucket. Now, the reason that this is important is because the people in your green bucket are your top performers. So it'd be like a student coming to me and say, Dr. Marciano, I got a 95 on my test or 90, but I want to get 100. All right. We love those students. We love those employees. That's awesome. But here's the thing. They don't actually have that much more to give us. Now, it doesn't mean
Right.
we're supposed to ignore them.
Right.
Like, we're not supposed to do that. But think about it. Where the opportunity exists is in that yellow bucket.
Right.
The red, if you do some sort of program, the red, it's just further confirmation of how they're losing in your organization.
Yeah.
They're losers, right?
Yeah.
And people spend way too much time, supervisors and managers, trying to bring them back into the fold. But there's people in the yellow bucket who has become somewhat disengaged or demotivated,
But have the potential.
but have the potential.
Right.
These programs, they're like, oh, you know what? I'll play because I want to get that carrot.
Sure.
So they play. In other words, their behavior increases, their performance increases. But then guess what? They don't win because the people in the green bucket win.
Right.
Right.
So you don't have to play this game many times before the people in the yellow bucket actually get resigned.
They figure it out.
They're like, yeah, you know what? This ain't winning.
Right.
So why should I put forth the effort? So then it ends up leading to resentment. The other reason, I'll just go back to, I think, the Employee of the Month thing, because it's really important, and it equates, of course, to an Employee of the Year or, a couple employees. The thing is, if you were being legit about it, Employee of the Month, you'd probably have the same one or two employees every month.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah,
Get it.
Consistent
exactly.
performance. is
Consistent
something-
pace, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one guy telling me he was on stage, the year end, he was getting a Employee of the Month or Employee of the Year, and he's standing up there and he's looking out at the audience, right? Another 100 whatever people. He said what he kept thinking was that there were 5 or 6 or 7 other guys that should have been on this stage. And you know what they were thinking? The same thing.
Yeah, I should have known that.
Yeah.
So now what you've done is you've elevated an individual and you've alienated other people
Right.
who
Resentment
have
follows.
also been right.
Right.
Now, what happens in equity theory is people will then actually reduce their efforts in alignment with what they feel. Like if other people are getting rewarded more,
Right. Why put the effort in?
you'll reduce your effort.
Sure.
So when carrots and sticks don't work, but you also do a lot about respect in the workplace.
Right.
So how has I even noticed at my age how the work environment has changed over the last 25, 30 years, right? And I'm sure seeing that you must have seen gigantic changes from when you first started practicing, right?
Well, tell me about the changes you've seen.
Well, I come from more of a blue-collar background, so, there would be, foul language, that type of stuff from supervisors back and forth, and, it could get a little harsh, right, in a blue-collar environment. And now, I've totally, seen, let's sit down, let's talk about it, what's going on, instead of just, coming out and saying 20 years ago, we would say something we would consider nowadays inappropriate. So, and at first I was when I noticed these changes happening, I was like, but what's going on? But now you really think about it, we're all have feelings and emotions. And a lot of times, a lot of guys in a blue collar environment, they don't want to show those emotions, but they're underneath, okay? So, especially if a new guy's coming on the job and he's doing something that he shouldn't be doing or she shouldn't be doing, how you address that? How do I get that person to be a better employee? How do I, it's been a gigantic change in the blue collar field, and I think that started in the white collar corporate America. It's sort of drifted down, and really huge change how employees and managers communicate now versus years ago.
Yeah, I have to deal with a lot of corporate managers at this stage in my career. A lot of them are getting downsized, and usually I'm called in years before to work with these people before they get downsized, and it's a degradation that happens each year over time, where people they tell me the stories of just how horrible it is working in corporate America, and for the last 25 years with me working with them, I've just seen it get uglier and uglier and uglier. So I've seen a major change in the respect that's given to people within the organizations.
So when you say uglier over time, what do you mean by that?
The backstabbing, and just sort of the anecdotal stories that I hear from people, and for the most part, they want to put the time in, but to your point, they feel like they're up against a wall to try to even make it move the needle within the organization. So the situation for them seems very depressing.
I got a question for you. So you hear these stories, right? I've never been inside Google. I don't know if you have. But you hear these gigantic companies, right? And they got foosball tables.
Yeah.
And, people are skateboarding down the aisles, and it's like a big couch, and you get your laptop, and you just do all your stuff, right? It sounds foreign to some of us, right? And they're killing it. Look at their earnings. Whatever they're doing, it's working, right? So that environment that these big tech companies are creating, and it's spreading to the rest of corporate America too. The open floor plan, more offices, communications better. Have you seen? You're going around, you're talking to all these. Are they just killing it because they have a really good business model, or are they killing it because they're creating an environment where people can communicate better, respect for each other, and that shows up in the bottom line with innovation and technology? We're all using these things, right? We're all using Google. We're all using YouTube. Was it their respect for their employees that got them there, or was it just basically that they just had a really great idea? Because they're working in a business environment, a corporate culture that a lot of us would see as foreign.
Or will they eventually get to the same place that the rest of corporate America is?
25 years from now, is it going to be it doesn't seem like that, though. You know what I'm saying?
There's a lot to what you guys have just talked about.
in a nutshell.
So culture is really important,
Right.
and that's something the last, I think, 5 or 10 years companies are paying attention to, because it doesn't matter if it's where you work or you work out or you worship. There's a particular culture, and that really matters because culture leads to certain behaviors and attitudes, and then those behaviors and attitudes reinforce the culture. I know, for example, what's that gym where you can't grunt or something?
Oh, Planet Fitness.
Planet Fitness, right?
Yeah.
So they have a culture where you can't yell and scream and grunt.
No,
right?
They hit the lunk alarm. A big siren goes off.
Big siren.
Yeah.
So in that particular culture, there are behaviors that are appropriate and behaviors that aren't appropriate. And by the way, culture should ideally be driven by the core values of an organization. So let's just say respect is a core value.
Which should be.
Okay.
Totally.
A lot of companies are. Okay. Now, what does that actually look like on the playing field? So if the core value of respect is one, is supposed to drive culture, then part of that culture may be that people are spoken to in a particular manner, not spoken to in another manner. So as an example, unfortunately, I see too much of this where a boss will start yelling at a subordinate.
That's not going to work anymore.
Right. No. So that's inconsistent and incongruous with the desired culture. Now, what's really important is that that person actually be held accountable for that behavior, which in some organizations they are, in some organizations they're not. If you're a top sales guy,
Right, you can get away with
you
it.
get away with
a
what
lot,
you want,
yeah,
right?
right.
Unfortunately, that's the way that it is. I do think. I mean, to get back to your question of
The respect in the culture, like in these big tech companies, and the way they're. I mean, they're 25 years ago. If you would have walked inside of Google, you'd have thought you were on Mars. Like people are just sitting on couches with laptops, doing this, doing that. But it's working. Whatever they're doing, it's working.
It's interesting because yesterday I got invited to speak at a technology conference in May. They're going to have Google and Facebook and Apple, all those companies there, which will be really interesting. You know, what I think about. When I think about, and I have been in those companies where they have the couches and all that good stuff, you have to think about it's a much younger generational thing.
Yes.
The values and interests of the younger generation are like way different, you know, and there are all kinds of things, right? Like they're not getting married as soon, or they're not getting married,
Right.
Yeah,
or they're
not
not
buying
having
house.
kids. That my godchild, she's engaged. And she works. Her fiance is in graduate school, and they're looking right now to buy one of those tiny houses, or they call them, like 400 square foot houses.
Okay.
Right.
Like they don't want possessions, you know. When you think about millennials, I guess, or they're younger than millennials now, but in order to attract top talent, you need to provide people with flexibility and autonomy.
Right.
Like this idea of you're going to come to work, you're going to sit in your seat, this is what you're going to do, doesn't fly. And I've seen people, younger people, leave jobs for less money because of the whole quality of life.
Quality of life.
Right. Right.
Do you know, like the idea that we like enjoying what you do and have it be meaningful is a relatively new concept.
I
Yes.
can see that, yeah.
Yes.
And Western.
Yes.
Like when my grandfather was working in the rock quarry 16 hours a day,
That was not his
he
passion.
wasn't like, oh yeah, do I enjoy this? That's not the right. So there's a luxury.
We're living in interesting times.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a luxury that the younger generation has that works in those environments.
Right.
So I mean, it's the whole that culture is really smart people that really push each other. You know, it's hard in some ways, I think, to even think about that relative to so many the rest of corporate America, because it's just such a unique culture.
Right.
And you guys know Tony Hsieh sold Zappos for $1 billion, right? I think it's Amazon.
Right.
So during an interview, and he wrote a book, Delivering Happiness. It was an awesome book. But they interviewed him, and he had sold a company prior for like $200 million. And they said, well, why'd you sell it? And he goes, because I lost control of the culture.
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
So, you know, either you create the culture or it just creates itself.
But so.
And we haven't talked about respect, which is what I do, right? So,
Yes. But what I was trying to bring it back to respect is, it seems like they have a new respect for employees in a lot of these tech companies, where they give them a lot of. I mean, we all knew, like, you know, as my wife said, everyone thought working from home and taking a laptop home was going to be a great idea when it came out 25, 30 years ago. It was like a privilege. It was a
game
you just
changer
work a
in
lot
some
more.
sense.
It's like, great, yeah, take your laptop home. Man, go ahead, work from home. You just work a lot more because now you can never shut it off.
Right.
So, you know, what I'm trying to say is, like, respect in the workplace. Are these new tech firms, do they have a lot more respect in the workplace than some of the older traditional organizations that you know, they are full of a lot more younger people. The managers are younger people, progressive thinking, and that's why I was trying to tie it to the respect
Right.
thing. Are they respecting
so-
their employees and what they want more and letting the employees sort of like,
Yeah.
that how the culture developed.
Yeah, no, I would.
Because it came out of nowhere within like 5-10 years, and all of a sudden everybody was doing it.
I would agree with you. The conference that I referenced, it's about inclusion as part of. So obviously the tech companies are much more sensitive to the idea of fair treatment for women and minorities, and just creating a culture that's just. This is an adult podcast, right?
Right.
I don't have kids.
No.
I have to share this one because it's one of those ones that just sticks out. I worked with a construction company, and there was a guy who was kind of getting really abused, right, by his manager, and yelled and screamed out publicly. And he went to the HR manager, who was a woman, and he told her
what was said.
going on. Yeah, her response was, "You need to grow, Seth."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting, especially in today's day and age.
Now, I don't think that would fly at Google.
No.
That's not going to happen.
But on a construction site, it's a little different.
It's a little bit different, right?
Right,
Because
right,
it's a different culture.
Gotcha. So it's about the cultures.
I think more and more, to answer your question, I think that organizations do understand, in general, fostering a culture of respect and why that matters. Because the thesis, if we can just turn there for a minute, is that respect leads to engagement. Okay, and engagement is different from motivation in the sense that it's really internal, right? That level of engagement, because a high level of commitment to the mission of the organization. And so with the kids in the tech company, they have a really strong connection because it's inspiring, right? To be a great leader, what you have to do is you have to be able to articulate a compelling vision and then inspire others to work in ways to fulfill on that vision. And so there's a great story about John Kennedy going to NASA, makes this ridiculous, audacious claim, right? We're going to put a man on the moon, right? And he's walking around, he's talking to people, and he says, "Hey, what do you do here?" And he goes, "I'm working to put a man on the moon." And it turns out the guy was a janitor.
Wow.
Like, he gets it.
Yeah, he's
Gets
part
it.
of the
It's all
part of the
part.
machine.
So everyone's focused, lasered in.
Yeah.
He gets it, right? So when you go to an organization, I always say, like, why are you here? And then you throw the mission up, like, this is why you're here. Like, you each have roles and responsibilities within that, but that's what you need to be committed to. So to the extent that organizations can inspire their employees around a mission, and create a culture where people depend on one another and there's a high set of expectations. I don't use sports analogies all the time, but they do work. And as an example is, on a really high functioning team, you see people give high fives when appropriate and kicks in the butts when people need it, right? But what happens a lot of times when things aren't going well, what happens is people start pointing fingers.
Yeah, it's human nature a lot of times.
Right,
Yeah.
right. When everything starts falling apart, everyone starts pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah.
Great.
So to create a culture where people are really, truly inspired to work toward a mission. And the respect model is, again, the extent to which people feel respected, they engage. And that respect model is defined in two ways. One is, for the people listening to this or watching this, so if you can think about, it's called the circle of respect. If you can think about a time when you really respected the organization you worked for, to name those companies. If you can think of times when you really respected your manager or leader, okay, write those names down. A time when you really respected the work that you did, you found it as fundamentally meaningful. A time when you respected your fellow team members, you're on a team that people, right, supporting one another. And then a time when you fundamentally felt respected as an individual within the organization. Now, if you ever held a job at a moment in time for which all five of those were simultaneously true, and imagine there's an audience of 100 people, right? I asked that question. Maybe 3 or 4 people raise their hand, and here's what you get. They're all smiling. They're all shaking their heads up and down. And I say to them, "So what's it like for you to go to work?" And they're like, "I love it."
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Unless they're in Eastern Europe and they go, "I like it very much." So the point is, right, people, and I said, well, did it have anything to do with money? No.
Right. There's an internal drive that they just enjoy doing what they're doing.
Well, but it's the fact that they feel that they respect the environment, right? They respect they respect what they're doing. They respect the people they work for, and then they feel respected. And then I ask people to think about a time they've left a job, and whether it had anything to do with respect. And it usually does. There are lots of reasons we leave jobs, but a lot of times it can have to do with I've lost respect for my manager, or I feel disrespected by my manager. And this issue of respect is so deep, and I say this.
I think it's who we are down deep inside.
Right. I say this without, by the way, hyperbole, that respect is a matter of life and death. So if you think about, dueling, like challenging somebody to a duel, which was perfectly acceptable until the late 1800s in the U.S., right? Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr.
Right.
So what is that? So I am willing to kill you or be killed by you to restore honor and respect.
Huge.
Asian cultures, I'm willing to commit ritual suicide to restore honor and respect to me or my family. Gang members kill each other over nothing but the issue of being respect. You're about being dissed, right? Your colors, your reputation, your turf, right?
So it's DNA. It's in us.
It's in us, and here's why. And the last thing is, we have revolutions and wars. I mean, the American Civil War, the rights for African Americans, most of the wars and revolutions you can think of are related actually to the issue of respect for human rights.
Right.
So here's why it's so important: is because respect means, if you're respected in your organization or your tribe, it means that you have value. And if you have value, you're protected.
Right.
Right. So your opinions are listened, they're heard too, people don't mess with you. But if you're not respected, it means that you're not viewed as having value and you're expendable.
Which then again lessens your productivity if you don't feel like you're part
Yeah.
of the bigger picture. You don't feel like you're part of the mission statement. You don't feel like you're moving the organization forward. And that just results in the bottom line eventually.
So do employers not get it, or they're impatient, or what's preventing the other 96 of those 100 people?
Or are we just in a is everything just moving? Like we're just watching the respect thing develop through
Or these
more
cultures, the older cultures have to die out before the newer cultures would
figure
adopt
it out.
I think that's kind of legit, like a snake losing its skin or something.
Right. It'll
I
get
could
there,
see,
just when, type of thing?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because if you think about people that get in higher levels of authority, right, in an organization, assertiveness is rewarded. Right? Assertiveness looks like initiative, it's rewarded.
Right.
What can happen, though, sometimes is that assertiveness turns to aggressiveness. And when you're up here, right, like what you've done, you've always been successful, so you're going to keep doing what you do, and no one then challenges you around that. And so you do get people that they very much lose perspective of what it's like, right? To sort of be on the first level. I wish that I could be optimistic. I mean, I think you guys are kind of asking that question. Are we going to see companies in general become much more respectful in terms of their culture? I hope so.
Right.
They're certainly more aware of it.
It sounds like your life mission.
It is. No, it's definitely because I think fundamentally
Professionally.
respecting people is the right thing to do. But it also substantially contributes to the bottom line, because when people feel respected, they engage.
Right.
They work harder.
Their ideas open up. Their passions come.
Well, that brings up another interesting point. You talk a lot about the corporation situation, but what about, would the respect concept work interpersonally, just in your regular personal life, or how about between customers and employees, not just employees and employers?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so you can translate that into
Yeah,
pretty much life.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it when people come up to me and they say, that my work has mattered, as much or even more in their personal lives. And just very quickly, the respect model is an acronym. So the R is for recognize. So this is
go through
what
that,
leads. Yeah. So once I realized that respect really matters, right? It's really powerful for the employee. It's what leads an employee to feel respected. So these are the respect drivers. So the R is for recognition. So recognizing, acknowledging people for their contributions. You ever been somewhere where you're not recognized or acknowledged, or your boss steals your ideas? Pretty demotivating, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
E is for empowering people. So giving people like really the tools and resources they need to be successful. By the way, the people we set up for failure the most are first line supervisors or managers, because we promote them into positions that have nothing to do with being successful in those roles. Right? We promote them because they're really good at their job. They're really good at turning the wrench, whatever that wrench is,
Right.
Because they have a good work ethic or tenure or whatever.
Sure.
Or sometimes just because somebody needs to fill the role,
Right.
but not because they're necessarily really good at building teams and delegating and coaching and training. So empowering people to be successful. S is for supportive feedback. So the most important function of a manager is to make the people underneath him or her successful. And if you don't believe that, you're in the wrong role.
Right.
a critical part of that is being able to provide people with feedback, right? Ongoing constructive feedback. And I tell people, you never have to give critical feedback again. You just have to give supportive feedback from a place that I care about you, right? I care about our team. I care about our customers. So that ongoing coaching and mentoring. P is for partnering, so developing collaborative working relationships, first one-on-one with the team, across teams. The whole thing about the younger generation too, that hierarchy stuff doesn't work, right? That's not what they don't want. I work for some military, and that's the major, general, colonel, whatever. That does not fly in today's traditional work environment for younger generation, right? They want a flat system. The second E is for setting clear expectations and holding people accountable. The C is for demonstrating consideration. My favorite quote, John Maxwell, people don't...
Great speaker.
People
Oh my
don't
God.
care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
Right.
And then trust, right? So establishing a sense of mutual trust, which is so closely tied to respect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So those are the drivers. So if an organization, if a manager is really good at exhibiting, at those behaviors, you're going to get a really highly engaged workforce.
Wow. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I notice, before we get close to the end here, I notice the other passion you have in your life is health. And I think it's a little, personally, I think that if you're healthy, you are a more engaged person on some level.
Yeah.
Right? I know when I lost my 70 pounds, I got off the couch, right? I was like moving around a lot. I felt like a different person. So you also, throughout your life, have been devoted to health. You into yoga too, correct?
No, it was I taught spinning for almost 20 years.
Right,
Wow.
right.
Yeah.
So how has that affected your life, your journey through health? And when did it start? Was it just because you grew up on a farm with great food, or was it just you got it? Like, how did that happen? Because me and Rob are a little bit on the health geeky side, so we always like to ask those questions.
I know you are. That's such. Honestly, that's an interesting question. What I can say about it.
How did it
is,
develop? Organically?
I don't know.
It was just there all the time.
I just
7-day-a-week work ethic.
I guess. I mean, it's funny because I it was just it was always part of my father always exercised, and it was just kind of part of what I grew up, the culture, right, of the house.
Well, before it was popular, your dad. I mean, your dad was
Yeah,
exercising.
well, he
like
was in the
before-
military. He came out of the military, so it was all
Okay.
part of the regimen,
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha.
But what I would say is that the reason I'm associated in some ways with healthcare is because I wrote an article or whatever many years ago, but just happens to get cited a lot on motivating people to keep to their New Year's commitments.
Okay.
Right, and like what that takes. And I always say it's not rocket science. I hate when people say, well, I don't have the willpower or the discipline, because that's not very helpful, right?
No.
It's not helpful.
No. Okay.
So what I do instead, and I can give you guys a copy of the article, and if you want to share it with your
Well, we can
listeners,
put it in the
I mean-
show notes if you like on the bottom of the video.
Oh, cool. So it's 8 strategies. Everything I do is skill based.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so you can be a better manager because there's a set of skills that go along with that.
Right.
So you can be healthier because there's skills that go along with that. So some very fundamental things. For example, one is just publicly announcing that you're committed to something, so anything, actually increases the likelihood of your remaining committed to it.
Yeah.
Just that,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like if you
We
put it
throw
up
it
on your
out there,
desk,
people are, wow, are you still doing it?
hold
Are
you
still-"
accountable,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely,
In
yeah.
some way. I did a whole health and wellness program for a company, and I was trying to predict people that would be successful. There aren't many. There's not much work in this area. Actually, there wasn't. So how do we predict? We're gonna spend resources on people to go through a program. We want people who are going to be successful. So how can we predict that? So I came up with this little instrument. Number one question that predicted it was to the following. Do you need help and support as part of this program? The people who answered no failed
I
miserably.
was going to say, probably
Yeah,
failed miserably.
yeah,
Let's be
yeah.
honest with yourself, right? I mean,
So, and there's other things like just other tricks and paradigms and strategies.
So you took the same set of principles that developed the corporate America, the carrots and sticks, to the health sector. Like it's just like you sort of like you seem to analyze a problem and come up with a set of strategies.
well, you give a
to
process.
to have a process that goes. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
am I making
yeah.
sense here?
Yeah, and here's something that I would say really, I know we had to wrap up.
Yeah,
We have a couple
sure.
minutes or something.
Yeah.
So your life is given by a couple of things. And when I say given, it means like who you are. So
Mm-hmm.
your life is created and it perpetuates, I think, for a couple of reasons. So one, of course, is like what your our commitments are, what you're committed to. And by the way, you're committed to what you have in your life. So if you say, I'm committed to stop smoking, you smoke, you're actually committed to smoking. If you say, hey, I'm committed to losing weight and you're heavy, you're actually committed to being heavy. You say, I'm committed to a good marriage, you have a lousy marriage, you're committed to having a lousy marriage. That's just how it is.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And your life, and so your life also is given by your language, your words. So if I say, my mother-in-law is a, what,
Right.
then that's what she is. If I say that, my boss is a jerk, then he's a jerk.
In your mind.
Because we're never wrong.
Right.
Right.
And so what we speak actually gives us our life, right? So if I say, so here's an example. I say, I know you drive, Rob. If I say, driving in New York City is really hard. Like I could never do that. It's impossible. Okay, well, it's only impossible really hard because I say it is. There's nothing in the universe that says that's quote unquote hard.
Right.
This table is hard. It's harder than a sponge and not as hard as a diamond, right? Like that's real. But you have to really get that what you say in your head and out of your mouth is how you create your life.
Yeah.
It's true.
And what I'm working on, my new book, Respectful Conversations, How to Turn Confrontation into Collaboration, I talk about difficult conversations, and so, and all the reasons that conversations are viewed as difficult. Well, here's the first reason they're viewed as difficult, is because you say they're difficult.
Right. You've already set it up for that. So
if I say I'm going to have this really difficult conversation with either somebody who works for me or my boss or my wife, you're already setting yourself up and giving yourself a mindset that is totally, make it a lot less likely to actually ever happen or let it, go around well. So for me, a lot of this work as a theme it's always about who you're being as a person. With the respect model, for example, when I was working with this one guy, and basically it was just he was really toxic in the environment, the culture, and so the plant manager wanted me to work with him, and so of course it's all about respect. So the second time that we were together, went out to get a cup of coffee, and he was really rude to the waitress.
Wow.
And I looked at him like, what the hell was that?
right.
And he's like, this light bulb goes off. He goes, oh, you mean I'm supposed to respect everybody?
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, that's actually how
Yeah.
it works.
So
That's how this
It's not
works.
just the workforce.
Wow.
It's a
And-
workplace.
It's amazing how people like that get in leadership roles.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more story.
Yeah, just
quick
one more.
story.
Yeah, we'll
That's
wrap
it.
up, yeah.
So for those of you you guys probably been to Port Authority.
Yeah.
So there's that Heartland Brewery restaurant in there, and I had seen a client, but I had time to kill before one of the buses to Three Bridges, which runs about every 3 days, right? So one of them were going to come. So I'm sitting there, and it's like empty. It's the middle of the afternoon, and this guy comes over, John. He's my waiter, and he's one of those people who's like authentically positive. You know what I mean? Like, how was your day? And actually meant it.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
means it, right?
Not just for a tip.
You can just
to-
feel it.
Yeah, to feel it. You feel the energy,
Feel the
right?
energy.
So anyway, the bill comes, right, and on the bottom I said, hey John, thanks for your positive energy, great service. You really made my day. Okay?
Awesome.
All right. So he walks away and he goes up to the register or whatever. He goes to open a billfold, and you can like somebody does like a double take, right?
Yeah.
So he does a double take. He looks at it, and now the question comes up. Put you guys on the spot. He does something with it. What does he do with it? You want to guess?
What, as far as tearing it up and not
Yeah. What does
charging
he
you?
do with it?
Takes a picture.
He actually walked over and showed it to the maitre d'.
I was going to say probably
his boss, right.
Yeah.
Okay, his boss. Now, and I'm in earshot, right? And the boss says, "That's really nice. You should keep it." You've got to let that sink in and understand what a statement that is about how sad it is, how little recognition and acknowledgement we must get in the world that a note written by a total stranger said thank you was
Yeah.
worthy of showing to your boss, and he says, "That's nice. You should keep it." That blows my mind.
It's sad.
But what I want to leave you with is this idea that, every single day we have an opportunity to let people know the contribution they are to us.
Yeah.
And whether that looks like, the person who gives us coffee, or walking up to that, military person, in Port Authority and shaking their hand and saying, "Hey, thank you for what you do. Because of what you do, you keep my family safe. I get to do what I do." So every single day, we have the opportunity to let people know the contribution they are to us. And that's part of, I think, coming from a place of who I am
Right.
is a person of respect.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Zero. Well, Rob, any more questions?
No, no.
Well, we'd like to ask you two things. Well, one thing, when the new book comes out, you want to come back on?
I'd love that.
Yeah,
Awesome,
that'd be great.
That'd be great.
That'd be very good.
Well, thanks. This was the Help Me I'm Middle Aged podcast, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.